take reader back to a far simpler time, helping them understand how people celebrated the seasons and honored the growing cycles of 1100 years ago. So it's very interesting for me to see. I'm writing historical fiction. I'm very interested in this time period, and you see this beautiful resurgence of people around the world and honoring the earth in a very specific way.
Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 119 of Toward a Better Life. This is Kevin Pennell, and this is the podcast featuring like-minded people sharing their stories, ideas, and activities on what we all can do to generate a better life individually and collectively. And I just want to take a moment, too, to say a special thank you to all of you that have been following me through the years, and just want to keep doing and keep going, and just a subtle thank you so much. In today's world, there are truly opportunities for us to seek balance, harmony, compassion, and kindness on so many levels, personally, culturally, spiritually, to name a few, but it begins with each one of us as individuals. That's what I like to share on the podcast from around the world, seeking others of the same spirit, heart, and mind. This is the platform, a school, if you will, a venue to begin and continue that journey to wholeness and harmony. In today's podcast, we're actually going to be venturing to the Baltic, and we're going to be sharing a little bit with someone from Gotland. And I'll let you figure that out as we go. I also have another opportunity to share your prose, music, and poetry and storytelling. And that opportunity is yours. Just contact me. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't done so already through your favorite podcast platform, and keep following for weekly magical insights into earth-based spirituality, self-development, and self-care. Also, remember to support the show by leaving your review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It only takes a minute to leave that review. And do follow my website. Take a look at it, towardabetterlife.com, and you can contact me to learn more about a free discovery call. I'm getting folks that are doing that, and we're working through it together to help them create their own beautiful journey in life. Send all your inquiries to me, Kevin, at towardabetterlife.com. So, in this episode, I welcome Octavia Randolph. Side note of that is I've been reading some of Octavia's books on Ceridwen, the saga, and she's the author of the Circle of Ceridwen Saga, a book series set in the 9th century England, Denmark, and the Baltic island of, guess what, Gotland. And that is actually where Octavia lives. A lifelong fascination with the making of England, along with the material artifacts of the Anglo-Saxon and Viking Age, has ever guided her work. And the hand-carved combs, skillfully wrought swords, and gemmed goblets of the world of that saga, the path of her interest has led to extensive on-site research in England, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, and of course, Gotland. She's a frequent speaker at both international literary festivals and museums, and has been the recipient of artistic fellowships at the Ingmar Bergman Estate, the Fårö, Sweden, MacDowell, Ledig House International, and Byrdcliffe. Octavia and I took another perspective, though, at her works, and taking a look at them by reflecting on the spiritual, natural world, and medicinal insights one can glean from reading her captivating stories. So not only can you get entertained by her wonderful prose, but you can also really learn to live toward a better life. Settle in and enjoy my chat with Octavia Randolph and some deeper insights into the Circle of Ceridwen Sagas. I have to say I am so truly delighted to welcome Octavia Randolph to the program today. Octavia, you're looking bright, chipper, alive, and alert in Gotland. Is that Gotland or Gotland?
It's Gotland. It's Gotland, a small but very important island in the middle of the Baltic, which has been under the Swedish flag since 1645, but for many thousands of years was an independent little land of its own and retains that independent spirit. I've been a fortunate resident of Gotland for the last 6 years. It's a setting for my book series, and also a very, very important island in the Viking Age. And my book series is set in the Viking Age. The Circle of Ceridwen Saga. So being here on the ground, close to the source of my inspiration, is very important to me, and I feel extremely blessed to live
Uh,
here.
I have to say that the way that I got acquainted with you and found you, believe it or not, is on Facebook. I found it was a recommendation. This is just a thought, but it was one of the recommended books because they have all their algorithms and everything and figure all this stuff out. It's kind of spooky sometimes, but it recommended, oh, you need to check out this book series. And I said, oh, well, and I've always enjoyed fantasy and I've always enjoyed historical fiction. And it's just something very special to me, and it's part of my Oh, it's part of my heritage. It's part of my background, who I am. It's Scot, Welsh, Irish, German, and believe it or not, my lovely partner Vicky got me a present a few years ago for Christmas, and I didn't realize it at the time, but she bought a 23andMe DNA kit. And you'll like this part, Octavia. I found out I'm part Viking.
Well, hopefully not, but you absolutely are part Norse.
Yes, that's it.
We need to always keep in mind that a Viking was an activity, whereas
Yes,
Norse are the people group.
right.
So I would prefer to think that you were evolved enough that you weren't actually going a Viking, but that you were
No.
absolutely part of the Norse. And to be quite candid with you, if you've got Scots blood in you
Oh
or
yeah.
anything from Northern, you absolutely do have Norse blood in you in that
Yeah.
case because of their tremendous impact in the British Isles. So I think there's very few English people that do not, and Scots and Irish that do not have some Nordic ancestry, and in Ireland, particularly from Norway, because it was the Norwegians that founded Dublin, and throughout, what is today England. Those were essentially Danes. The raiders that came over were Danes. So yes, it's very common for many people to be able to trace back to that. But let's hope not specifically Viking blood, but Norse blood.
Yes. And I was going to mention that because I heard someplace not too long ago that people don't understand that a Viking is a culture. A Viking is not an actual bloodline. And that's
Yeah,
and that and
that's
you
true.
just affirmed
That's
that.
true. That's
Yeah.
true. There's no such thing as a Viking dog or a Viking dress or I mean, there's old Norse things,
Hmm.
but really the word Viking was an activity,
Yeah.
to go a Viking. And
Yeah.
in the over a million words of my books, I use the word Viking exactly once
Hmm.
when a young man who becomes a Viking, is in his first raid, and then he says to himself afterwards, is what it is to go a Viking. Of course, I use the term Viking as a shorthand for the era of the books in advertisements and in talking about the books. That's inevitable. But I essentially am writing about the foundation of the English people and how the Danes affected English society. But because the books take place both in Angleland in ninth century England, in Denmark, and from book 3 onward here on the island of Gotland, it's a diffuse background. And since you are reading the books, you know that it's
Hmm.
it's a multi generational family saga, and taking place in the late ninth century during the worst of the Viking predation in um, in England. But the whole point of the story is actually not only these tremendous conflicts between the invaders and English society, Anglo-Saxon society at the time, but also the conflicts between heathenry and Christianity.
Hmm.
And so you had two quite strong faiths, and amongst my characters, you have ardent believers in
Hmm.
both camps. I pride myself in presenting both faiths with respect, and because they both deserve that kind of honoring, uh, and one of the things that's very important to me is that in the ninth century, there you have this collision of the old gods, the Norse gods, Anglo-Saxon gods, Christianity, which of course had been reestablished in England with the coming of Augustine, St. Augustine in 597. England, of course, had been Christianized earlier by the Romans, but after the Saxon invasions, when the fall of the Roman Empire occurred and the legions withdrew from Britain, the Saxons and the Angles that came over from the continent were reestablished their heathen beliefs, so they brought their heathen beliefs with them, and so Christianity was just pushed to the outer corners, to Ireland and to Wales. So, but another thing that's common to both faiths is magic, because what happened during this time was not only an incredible confluence of these faiths, but the idea that healing was obviously so important for both Christians and for heathens, because it was the common way in which people could survive, and life obviously could be very dangerous, short and brutish. So healers were people that were highly regarded. I do think that one of the most important attractions that Christianity had as England was becoming rechristened, and one of the most important attractions when eventually the Nordic world became Christianized, is that Christians happened to be quite skilled healers, and I believe that one of the reasons for this was simply literacy, that they were able to actually write down what had worked for them as far as herbal recipes, and to share that with other people. And during the time frame of my books, which is the late 9th century, there was a very important and very precious compendium of healing recipes and magical charms that was compiled during the reign of Alfred the Great. And Alfred is a secondary character in my books, because my fictional characters interact with actual historic personages. But this book, which is available in modern English translation, is called The Leech Bald, and Bald being a monk, and it was written down by another monk whose name is Sild. And having been assembled during Alfred's reign, it was an incredible breakthrough in medical healing, because, of course, a lot of people in England, Christian people in England, could no longer read and write. It was only the very upper classes, the aristocratic classes, who even could do this, and of course monks and nuns. So instead of just the kind of herbalist, the village herbalist, or ordinary, men and women who used herbs and healing charms, this was an opportunity to gather this knowledge together. One of the things that's remarkable about it is that King Alfred had received, again, letters from the Patriarch of Jerusalem of special recipes to treat things like disorders of the spleen, and so it underscores again how important the power of writing was. But what's fascinating to us about the Leech book is how many of these healing recipes have to do with both prayer. To our modernized, a wonderful combination of Christianity and heathenry, because there's many prayers, there's magical rituals that need to take place that the ill person or the agent of the ill person does, like walking in a moonlit field, or one of the things I think is really fascinating, singing into a wound, literally addressing the wound. It was a very holistic way to look at things. So there's lots of recipes on how to take herbs and pound them and mix them with soap or honey, which has, of course, antibacterial qualities, and or wine, and pack the wound with those things. But there's also tremendous amount treating the the patient holistically in a way that got really, really lost in later medicine.
Hmm.
Um, but there was also a wonderful aspect with healing, which had to do with healing the land. There's a very famous charm called Aeserbot, which is the healing of unfruitful land, which in which turf cut from the land is literally carried into a church and put on the altar. I mean, this it was very clear that priests and other religious, were endorsing this combination, and many of these early prayers, refer both to Mother Earth and to God the Father. So it was a wonderful amalgamation during that time. It was very, very fluid in many ways that we don't really imagine. One of the things, of course, that was so shocking about Viking predation was there was no honoring of monasteries and convents and churches. That in fact was where the silver was. That's where the treasure was,
Yeah.
and so they were great targets. Um, but this was so appalling to the Christians because, of course, holy people were holy people, and you didn't just, destroy their livelihoods and lives like that. So that was quite horrific. But both both of the when you look at both of the faiths and you see, eventually this melding, which became very important, and a beautiful undercurrent of what we really need to think about as magic. That's very, very interesting to me, and something which I I I I think is quite exciting uh, for modern people. I very much enjoyed listening to your episode 100 and Dana O'Driscoll, the modern Druid, talking about something that was quite arresting: the fact that during the pandemic, Druidic societies doubled in the population of membership, that there was just tremendous interest in it. And she ascribed that to people spending more time in nature
Hmm.
because they were in isolation um, uh, during the pandemic, during various lockdowns. And what did that do? It helped people to slow down.
Yeah.
So this, reflection and discovery take time. And so that was very, very interesting to me. It's one of the things that when I think about the subjects that I write about, um, my, my books take reader back to a far simpler time, helping them understand how people celebrated the seasons and honored the growing cycles of 1100 years ago. So it's very interesting for me to see. I'm writing historical fiction. I'm very interested in this time period, and you see this beautiful resurgence of people around the world, again honoring the earth in a very specific way, and again conjuring such a positive kind of magic that is quite thrilling to observe.
It is. And, one of the things that I really noticed right at pretty much at the beginning of my reading of the Circle of Ceridwen series was the undercurrent of the spirituality that's there. And I love the way that it melded. It just became part of what you're reading and part of the experience. It was very exciting. You have the different, conflicts and so
Oh,
forth that might go on, and you have the physical
oh,
contact between people, and
yeah.
your work with words is phenomenal, Octavia.
Oh, thank you.
But
Well,
but the thing that I see the most, I say that's most, but the thing I certainly do appreciate is how you depict the life of what they were living and how they were interconnected with the natural world, and they honored the natural world. I'm working on a online course right now for folks in herbalism, and one of the things that I bring up in the beginning of that is there were people who were called, or the activity that they did was called simpling. And I don't remember which book it was, but the first time that I saw it, I said, "Oh yeah!" And it may have been even in book one, and I think it may
yeah.
have been the nurse that says, "Go get the simples chest." I said, Oh my gosh, there's only one thing that I know of that would be that. And but simples, you take one herb and that all the different things you can do with that one herb. And granted, you can
Right,
combine it, but it's miraculous in and of itself. You mentioned about honey. Honey is a
right,
miraculous,
right,
it's not an
right.
herb, but it's certainly
Yes,
highly medicinal.
it
But
is
just
indeed.
but just the way
Indeed.
that you depict these people and you depict their culture in such a beautiful way. And I think about Tinder for an example, and how Tinder is deaf. And he got it from a fever when he was a child. And I just, my heart goes out to him. But the way that he worked within his incapacity to hear and how he created his
Mm.
own names for the people, it was
Thank you.
magic. It's
Thank
magical.
you. That
Yeah.
that that particular book, when Tinder came out, which is book five, I received such an outpouring of love from the deaf community,
Mm,
which astounded me. I mean, I was suddenly being written to by not only the deaf community themselves, but parents of deaf children and American Sign Language and British Sign Language
mm.
teachers telling me how wonderful it was to see a hero who was deaf. Just to put things in focus, Kevin, for listeners not familiar with the books, the book one. And the titular character, Ceridwen, is a 15-year-old girl in book one. She is from a heathen background and at age 9 is goes having been orphaned completely goes into a priory. So then she's raised by Benedictine monks, and so she is christened late in her life at 9 years of age. Uh, Later on in book one, and she has some serious questions about Christianity, mainly having to do with the concept of forgiveness, because it but she has joyous memories of her uncles who were very happy heathens.
Mm.
But later on in book one, she comes to the realization, which is very difficult for her, that she is no Christian. One of the reasons it's difficult for her to turn her back on Christianity in her heart, because she's living amongst some very devout and very good Christians at this point. But she she feels that well let me just back up for a little bit. One of the things that was very attractive about Christianity to heathen people was the concept of mercy. And
Hmm.
this is the thing that Caradron is very interested in, is the concept of mercy, because uh, justice was always something that was there amongst the Norse and the Anglo-Saxon. But mercy is a very specific Judeo-Christian concept of being merciful, not just being just, but being merciful. Not that individual people couldn't be merciful, but institutional mercy, such as Christ, taught. That was extremely attractive. That was very, very attractive. Um, the second thing, of course, the after death fate of women and non-combatants was extremely important, because in early Germanic religions, in both Anglo-Saxon and uh, uh, Viking, Norse religion, Valhalla, Asgard, those those areas of the happy warrior death that goes to these gemmed halls of Freya and Odin that warriors who fell in battle went to. It was a very exclusive society. I mean, you were up there, eating and drinking and wenching all day long and fighting just for sport. And the end of that day, all your wounds were healed, and then you started over the next day. It's really kind of a 14-year-old boy's conception of heaven.
Yeah.
So, so women and non-combatants were generally in the Norse world consigned to Hel, Hel, who was a goddess. It's a place not necessarily of punishment, but certainly not at all the revelry of the gods' halls, which warriors could look forward to.
Unless they
Um,
were a shield maiden.
well, yes, but they the shield maidens were already part of that world. I mean, they were not
Yeah.
human, right?
Yeah.
Even though Ceridwen's, affectionate name given by her husband is Shield Maiden.
Yeah.
So, so it was a very uncertain kind of world. Snorri Sturluson, who was the great Icelandic historian and a Christian, and he died in 1241, way after the end of the Viking era. But he suggests that unmarried women could go up to Asgard to serve a minor goddess whose name was Gefjon in her hall. And he also sort of suggests that there's other levels of Asgard that were suitable for other people who were not warriors. He named a place called Sindri, which is for righteous men, or there was a specific hall filled with serpents for murderers and perjurers and so on and so forth. So he had a little bit more detail there, but mostly what we know about the Norse conception of the afterlife was this kind of glorious 14-year-old heaven conception of heaven for warrior men, and the rest was not very interesting for women. Christianity turned that on its head.
Yep.
Because Christianity, offered, if you are a good person, you are going to go to heaven, and men and women were going to be equal, and you're going to see your loved ones again, and you weren't going to be separated forever. I mean, it was a tremendously, you know, attractive because of that. So anyway, when I talk about Ceridwen being aware of all this, and she at age 15 she realizes that's really good, but she has a difficulty with warriors going out doing horrific acts and then being forgiven, through confession, and just to go out and do the same acts again. So she has serious issues with that as well. But so she's an example of heathenry. I also want to just briefly mention why I use the word heathen and not pagan, which I know is much more common these days. It's simply it's simply my choice, in the sense that pagan, of course, is from the Latin paganus, country dweller. Heathen is an Old English word, and I'm writing about that time period. Again, very similar in the heath, people who are living in, the countryside. So I use the term heathen rather than pagan, but I that's just my personal preference because it is, the English word for it. So she's an example, Ceridwen's example of someone who has had a foot in both worlds and needs to live in a Christian world, but in her heart realizes that the old gods are more attractive to her. Then we have some very devout and very good Christians that she's surrounded with. We have people who are wholly heathen, like Sidroc, who becomes her husband, and who is a Dane and a raider. And then we have innocent Tinder, who again was born and lived here on the island of Gotland, was born whole, but owing to scarlet fever, which actually took the lives of his two slightly older sisters, becomes death. And so his conception of the gods is an entirely nature focused kind of goddess, and he believes, particularly because he's a hunter and a very skilled one, bow and arrower, he is dedicated to the lady of the forest, and so who he believes leads him to game, leads him to both deer and boar, so that he can feed his mother and father. And so we've got we've got a spectrum in the book series of beliefs, and I very much enjoy examining that spectrum, because I think I try to be as honest as I can about what it may have been like to be in that huge spectrum that was very possible during the ninth century.
It's a matter of the natural world and honoring the natural world and honoring everything within it. It's I appreciate animism a lot. That everything has a right, everything has a soul,
Right.
everything is alive. When I was first told that, I wasn't like aghast of that. It made sense to me, but it did stop me to think. When a dear friend of mine told me, he says, "Did you realize?" He says, "that stone is alive." And I had to think about that. And he
Right.
says, and it's very, very wise if you think about it, because how do stones move? They communicate with a person, and the person says, "Oh, what a pretty stone." And they pick it up and they move it because the stone wanted to be moved. I said, it's
Oh,
brilliant. And
yeah.
then, I was just sharing yesterday, I think it was, in an interview, and I finally got around to getting and reading a book that has been. Do you have books in your library, Octavia, that have been there for a while and you never get around to reading them, and then suddenly you decide to read them?
Many,
And
many.
so the one that I've got is The Secret Life of Plants. It was written
Oh,
in 1972, and it's an incredible book, but it talks about how the research and everything proves out that we think about a plant. And yeah, we see the aerial parts of the plant, or we see the trunk in essence, the plant. I mean, the tree is a plant, and yet we don't see what's underneath. We don't see all the wisdom, if you will, of how these leaves and how the trees bend and yield and communicate and do all this stuff. But going back into what I saw with Tinder and what I saw with Ceridwen and a lot of the other characters, even the Angles, that they had a certain reverence for the natural world. And if there's anything that I would love to be able to do, particularly in this podcast, is to help people reconnect with the natural world. Because if I have stress, if I have tension, if I have frustration, all I got to do is go out and sit in my grove for 15 minutes. And the Japanese came out and they said, this is brilliant. Back in the 1980s, they came out with the concept of forest bathing. And
right.
everybody gets on board and says, yeah, this is great. But Octavia, this concept has been around for thousands of years. And we're saying,
It,
and it's not reconstructing it, it's a realization saying, I don't necessarily need to go back to the ninth century, but I can take the bits and pieces from the ninth century and bring it into my life today.
yeah.
Honor the
Uh,
life.
Absolutely. So true, Kevin. The other thing it's worth bringing out is that life was lived out of doors.
Yeah,
I mean, that we are so sequestered within our homes with all our modern conveniences, but people worked hard every day, physically in the fields amongst their animals. I mean, because light was so important. Very often, women did their spinning and their weaving out of doors or by an open door, so that they could see the light. The interiors of houses were small, very smoky, and dark. And so people were outside. People were much more a part of the earth out of necessity. They were much more aware of everything. And of course, because they were farming and because they were keeping animals, they were so much more connected to the rhythms of the seasons and to their own stewardship of that land. So it's another thing, living life out of doors. I mean, for us, to be able to walk in a forest might be a rare ability that we have, you know, once a week or something if we're close enough to some majestic trees to really be close and put our hands on them and so on. But for our ancestors, they were pretty much outdoors so much of the day, and therefore were much more aware of the changes of the light and the sky, the way the sky looks, all of those things. That was part of their everyday experience, and that's what we need to help people, recover. Just going out and walking outside, just sitting outside. It's just hugely restorative for our spirits.
it
So
is. Yeah, because
yeah,
I grew up with David Attenborough, you know,
yes.
and I grew up with Wild Kingdom and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And I said, "Oh, wow, look at that, look at that." And it occurred to me that, you know, I don't have to watch that on TV. I don't have to watch that in a
No,
theater. I can go outside and I can experience the
that's
same
right.
thing. And maybe I don't have at the time, I didn't have the wherewithal and the knowledge that went along with some of it. But Octavia, what's interesting is with the natural world, if you just sit there and look at it long enough, you can learn how it works. You can learn about how the birds reflect and how, one
Hmm.
of the things that I remember is, again, one of the things that came up with studying the indigenous people of North America is they had comment about, well, you know why all the birds are in a huff in the morning. The reason all the birds are in a huff in the morning is they're sharing the latest news. And you laugh, but if
Well,
you think about it, they're telling each other where the food is, what the
right.
weather's going to be like, and it's honest and it's
Good. And
truthful.
also where they are.
Yeah.
I am here, and this is who I am. Where are you? Who are you?
Hmm.
There's all of this wonderful chatter in birdsong, which is delightful. I walk very early in the morning, and we're
Hmm.
blessed with blackbirds. And of course, the male
Hmm.
blackbird is a consummate singer, and they're always greeting you with their song. It's extremely beautiful, but you just feel that they're so social. If they see you in the dark, they'll start singing.
Hmm.
So it's that's magic.
And yeah, because it is magic, and one of the things that we wanted to really touch in with you, and we are in so many different levels, but that's the spirituality of all of the work that you do. And it's not a religious work, but you look at the undercurrents of the stories and you have the basis of a good life. You have the sense of honor. You have the sense of mercy. You have the
Mm,
sense of sharing, caring, giving, loving, all those things. And yes, you see tragedy, but tragedy is just a part of life and it's how you perceive it. And I can either wallow in the tragedy or I can move beyond it, which is what they do. I mean, her first her first husband, oh my gosh, I was driven to
yeah.
tears at a couple of points in that. And then,
Sure.
because he was blinded by a brutal act. And yet she compassionately cared for him enough and ended up, that was her first love. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, trying to present a spectrum of what was really going on. And yes, love, the eternal emotions, the eternal human emotions of love and compassion, and consistently striving to make lives better for ourselves and for others. And this is how we get through all difficult times in human history and in our individual lives, is to go outside of our own needs and to look at what we can do for others. With a cast of characters such are in my book, I'm able to present some, I hope, admirable characteristics uh, that others can identify with, and it makes me very happy that I have received so much communication from readers who saying this particular book really helped me, or that
Yeah.
situation really, so that there's no greater blessing, there's no greater endorsement for a novelist than to be told that your books were deeply meaningful, that they really are not mere entertainment,
Yes.
uh, but are really helping people to a deeper understanding, and I cherish that.
That's it. You've just nailed it. You've spoken paragraphs in one little bit that, it is truly appreciative that, I mean, like, I've really gotten into books in of all things in 2024, and here I am. I've been a journalist off and on throughout my life, and yet I wasn't, this is terrible, a journalist, and yet I didn't read that much. Shame on me. I mean, I read, but
I
something
think
happened to me within the past year, and Octavia, I can't stop.
that's excellent.
But I
I'm
have
a,
I have to say that when I read your books, Octavia, it does really touch my heart. It doesn't just activate my senses. Studies were done decades ago that we truly do think with our hearts. People had a hard time understanding that, but our heart can think. Our heart can create emotions and accept emotions and consider emotions. And it goes so much further than that. But, I've read other books and I've read other fantasy books and I enjoy it a lot. And I read my nonfiction stuff. Philosophical things, druidic things, herbal things, healing modalities. But I often would tell people, I said, well, I have at least two books going on at the same time. And I will say that that's been throughout my life. It started way back in college days. But it used to be I would consume or I would read maybe 2 to 3 books a year, and now it's 2 to 3 books every 2 to 3 months.
Excellent.
But what I saw in your work and what I see in your work, and I mentioned to people, I have the nonfiction or what I call some of the meat stuff that I look at, but then I have what I call brain candy. And initially, that's how I said, "Oh, good, Octavia Randolph. It's another great piece of brain candy." Well, it ain't. It covers a litany of emotions, a litany of information, a litany of cultures, a litany of all kinds of stuff, and I can walk away refreshed. I can walk away considering where do I fit in Earth and in life based on what I've read. So it's life changing, and I mean that. It's not just it's yes, it's very entertaining. Don't misunderstand. If you're thinking about reading something from Octavia Randolph, it's very, very, very entertaining. But at the same token, you can go so much deeper with it. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Thank you. I'm blushing. I'm blushing.
No,
Um,
you're reddening.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, I just I am blessed with the best readers in the world. Something occurs to me because you're one of my male readers, and it's been very, very interesting to me that a tremendous number of my male readers that have written to me have identified as being former military.
Hmm.
My older readers are oftentimes Vietnam veterans, and my younger readers are veterans of the Gulf Wars in particular. So they're very interested in the psychology of battle, and obviously they want a ripping story,
Hmm.
which I seem to give them a ripping story,
You
but
do.
they're very interested in the deeper aspects of warrior culture, and I really I really honor them very much. That obviously I cherish every reader that finds my books, but the male readers are hold a special place in my heart because sadly men just don't read as much as women do, and particularly fiction. So that delights me. And a special shout out to my Australian readers as well, because I have really wonderful coterie of readers in Australia. So I'm very grateful. Most of my readers are in the U.S. and but my Australian readers are very, very dear to me. And of course, many of them are of English extraction themselves, so they feel like they're reading about their own ancestors, and that's a lovely thing as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got a new one that just came out.
Yes, book 11. I'm writing book 12 now. Book 11 came out in September. It's called To the Sun. They are, because it's a multi-generational family saga, they really must be read in order. Every book has its number as part of its title. So book one is called The Circle of Ceridwen, book one. Book two is Ceridwen of Kilton, book two of the Circle of Ceridwen Saga, and so on and so forth. The exception is the standalone prequel called Sidrock the Dane, which is about male, the chief male protagonist, and that is his origin story. How, as I like to say, how the boy became a Viking and the man became a legend, and that dovetails into book one at the end, but it can be read at any time in the series. So there's actually um, there's 12 books out right now, but the book I'm writing for release later this year will be numbered book 12. So there's a lot of reading ahead of someone who is looking to be absorbed into a story for a given period of time.
Yeah,
But
Yeah, going back to Tinder for an example, that was kind of a break in a way, the way I saw it.
Yes,
And it gave me
yes,
a really it gave the reader, it gave us a really good backstory on this interesting hunter, Tinder.
yes.
And he's so much more than just a hunter. And
Thank
he
you.
is so deep. He is so aware of the
Thank
natural
you.
world around him. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal how he
And
does
very,
that.
and tremendously sensitive to other human beings. It's
Yes,
not,
that's
I mean, he's someone who exemplifies reverence to animals in his, blessing the animals that he kills. He only kills for food. He doesn't kill for any other reason. But he does so. It's a truly spiritual aspect to him, marking his hands with the runes before he goes out to hunt, blessing his bow and arrow, when he downs a deer, laying his hands reverently upon the animal, everything that he does with reverence to the natural world, and he's intuits it because, of course, since he is deaf, he's had to figure everything out for himself.
hmm
That book was very much a love letter to Gotland, because it was when I first came to Gotland in 1999 on a big research trip, for my writing. But when I returned in 2015, I just said, this is such an extraordinary environment. I need to write specifically about a child of this culture, and I, to put him in isolation with this beautiful little island, and how this island influenced him. So, and that's how Tinder, the character, came about. So he again, because he was deprived of his hearing at an early age and can't speak, he speaks eloquently with the use of his hands, and also just he's such a deep individual because of the reverence with which he approaches life. So I'm so glad that that book resonated with you, Kevin. I'm not at all surprised, but I'm delighted that it was specifically
well,
important to
it's even the way that you it was a lovely certainly backstory of him and his parents and their
you.
story.
Yeah,
But then you about halfway through, third of the way, I think it was about halfway through, you bring in Ceridwen
right.
and Sidrock.
Yeah, yeah.
And you told the story
Because they
from his
arrive.
mother's,
Right,
yeah,
right, right, right,
you told the story from
right,
his mother's and his perspective about
right.
who they were and who they
Right,
are.
right, right.
Yeah, so
They actually arrive in the last few pages of book three, but and then in four and five they're here on Gotland. But when in telling Tinder's story, the time is fluid. Time is always fluid, and in my
hmm
books, time is fluid as well, because we do go back and forth as we look at different characters' experiences. So halfway through Tinder, when he's still quite a young man, that is when Ceridwen and Sidrock arrive and greatly change his life, because he goes to live with them, and they hugely expand his life in so many ways.
And
And
the other piece that I saw also is just coming to mind is how we've already said it, that life itself really is not linear. It is circular and it does flow. And you depict this so well in the books about how
this
things
the
flow with
title
the
of the
season.
series. It's the
Yeah.
title of the series, The Circle of Ceridwen. That
Yeah.
it's just, she's at the heart of everything, but it's just her circle, how her life encompasses the lives of so many others. And yes, it is absolutely a very, very important concept in everything that I write.
It,
That
yeah, yeah, and it segues. I noticed
yes.
that particularly so in the Silver Hammer and Golden Cross. That's
Mm,
book six, and where you're going back and forth between Gotland and Angleland,
hmm.
and you're interspersing and saying, okay, this is going on here, but while this is going on here, this is what's going on over here.
Right.
And then you're able to bring some stuff together because of a Dane that shows up on Gotland, and Sidrock recognizes what's going on, and he needs to put on his sea axe and go down and visit these guys. And I'm going,
Right.
okay, this is going to get really dicey really quick. And he kind of, but the way he presents himself is phenomenal. he doesn't come across as, look at me, I'm a big guy and I'm gonna no, it's just very smooth and very eloquent and just kind of works with these guys and takes their money and dice,
He's a
which he
very good
does.
gamer. He's a very good gamer. Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's just a wonderful blend. So can I ask you what brought you into writing this series? I know we want to stay spiritual, but
Yeah,
it is curious.
it's really a lifelong fascination with the artifacts of the Anglo-Saxon and Viking Age. I loved what we have left behind as immaterial culture. I mean, the sea axes, which is a specifically shaped large knife that Anglo-Saxon thanes, who was the precursor to a knight, wore. The incredible treasures, for instance, found at Sutton Hoo, or the Taplow treasure. Everything, if you went to the British Museum, everything in rooms 39 to 41, all the glories of the Anglo-Saxon and Viking Age. So the physical objects are so beautiful. The carved combs, the decorated pots, uh, the weaponry that's beautifully decorated. Those things very, very much interested me. And because I'm interested in the foundation of the English people, you have a very dramatic situation in the late 9th century where you have 7 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, which were very often warring amongst themselves.
Mhm.
But under predation from the Danes, one kingdom after another fell and collapsing under Danish pressure until there was only one left, Wessex. And the king of Wessex happened to be a 23-year-old man whose name was Alfred, who we now know by the honorific the Great, because he was an extraordinary tactician and strategist.
Mm-hmm.
And so he managed, to uh, through a combination of both buying the Danes off, I mean, passing
Hmm.
over a total of 25,000 pounds of silver between his fathers and older brothers. He had 3 older brothers, all of whom had died before him. They were all king before him, but there was a tremendous amount of silver exacted by the Danes to leave us alone to sort of create a temporary peace. But finally had a very decisive battle at the Battle of Wedmore, which happened in 878, and that was the agreement with the then Danish warlord who became the king of the Danes in England. His name was Guthrum, and one of the, interestingly enough, because we are focusing on spirituality, one of the conditions of this peace, so England was partitioned, in this diagonal line running up through it, with the Danes on one side and the Saxons on the other. And one of the conditions was that Guthrum had to receive baptism
Hmm.
and accept Christ. And as a matter of fact, he took the baptismal name of Ethelred, and Ethelstan, excuse me, and was uh, Alfred himself stood as his godfather.
Hmm.
So this was another sign that you acknowledge as part of our peace together that you are adopting, at least in name, the idea that uh, convents and monasteries and churches are sacrosanct and there won't be any more predation against them. So it was very, very, very interesting. So this was the backdrop. I mean, there was such an incredible time of English history. And Alfred, who again is just a secondary character in my book, but he's the backdrop of all of this activity. He was a very inspiring figure to me as a young person, as he should be to many people who are interested in history, because he was an extraordinary leader. And his law code, I mean, he had so many things
Hmm.
that he did, which was so tremendously important. I mean, his law code is phenomenal, that he was, actually collected the laws of earlier Anglo-Saxon kings and codified them and made them known, and things like granting rights to the enslaved so that they could have one day a week in which they could work on their own behalf. And unlike in the Norse world, Anglo-Saxon slaves actually had rights. They're very limited, but they actually had some protection. And in the Norse world, that sadly did not happen. They had no refuge. So there's another positive thing about Christianity was the purchasing of the lives of the enslaved, and so they could live in monasteries or convents and be serving people there, and then eventually, very often, be freed. Um, so that was another. That's one thing that Cerridwen really picks up. She really learns to hate the concept of slavery and will not tolerate it in her life, and that radiates out amongst a lot of people that she knows because she refuses to believe that is possible, and she is very strong about that. So there was so many positive aspects about Christianity, which really did bless the lives of heathens, and there was so much intermingling. I mean, there was just, you know, there was one didn't overcome the other. It was tremendous absorption, on both sides, and that's one of the
That's
reasons that it makes it so interesting to me because there you constantly see this syncretic action amongst,
yes.
both faiths, and you see it in many of the characters too. So
And it just depicts the truth in that people learn to get along with each other regardless of their differences.
yes,
You're going
uh,
to have changes, you're going to have squabbles, you're going to have fights, but overall, you learn to accept each other for where you are, with neither one really taking control.
yes, where
You
you
just,
are on your journey.
yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah. And I
yes.
think that's a predominant factor that I see in the books, and you honor that well. And, it's kind of an example that we can say, granted, I'm not from a particular location. I'm not going to go political. I'm just not. But I may have my political beliefs, and yet at the same token, they may be completely in opposition to the other side, and yet I accept that person because why? They're a human being, and they may not agree with everything I have to say, but ultimately, they're a human being. And I go back to the forest, I go back to nature,
Yes.
and I look and I say, over here is a inch right out in my grove. I have a big red oak. I mean, this thing, it's been around for a while. They don't have the age that the white oaks do, but it's been there for a while. And right next to it is a bay tree. And they're like 3 to 4 feet apart. And they're different trees entirely, but they're living together.
Yes,
And
yes.
they understand each other, and their roots intermingle with each other.
That's
So,
right.
our takeaway
And
for that is why can't we?
yes, and both of them are giving you pleasure
Hmm.
that you can see and appreciate both of them for what they are.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah. So, true to the theme of what I usually do, of course, with Toward a Better Life, and you've listened to a couple of episodes, so I'm going to put the question out there to you. What does Octavia Randolph do to create a better life for herself?
Walking is the foundation of my creativity. I
Hmm.
walk. Uh, when I say it's the foundation of my creativity, I arise very early. 4 or 4:30 in the morning is not at all unusual for me. I go out. I happen to be blessed with living in a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a little medieval town of Visby. We have a gorgeous little botanical garden that is right within the medieval walls of
Wow.
the town. I spend an hour walking very fast in Visby in the dark with my little Sony recorder in my hand, and I am telling myself the story as I walk. And then I come back, and later in the morning, I transcribe it. So walking is everything to me. Walking is my creativity. It is a spiritual practice. It is a mental health practice. Uh, I I cannot. I do not think I could exist without walking.
Hmm. Okay. That's beautiful. I do have to say, listeners, that not only should you look into some wonderful works that Octavia has presented and has written, they're all a delight to read. But I have to say something else, and I almost forgot, Octavia. The recipe book is phenomenal, even though it's really short. And I have made browis, I have made honey cakes, and the
Oh,
list goes on. I think there's
yeah,
there are a few recipes there,
yeah.
but do
I
yourself a favor
Yeah,
if
thank
you
you.
really
And
look at
it's
some, it's
yeah, it's free.
delightful.
It's free on my website.
Yeah,
So what I did was I developed 10 recipes from the food which is mentioned very frequently in the saga books. So it's a little recipe booklet which Kevin is talking about, which has 10 recipes which are very typical of what my characters are eating.
yeah.
So that's it's free on my website. So
And
you can do
for what
that.
it's worth, I don't know if we're going to go off on a side tangent here, but really, I remember in some years ago, I was exposed to some primitive skills in the sense of earth skills. That's a better term. And you learn how to connect with the world again and so forth. But where you get your nourishment from the earth, and when you get real earthy food, now this is no preservatives, no extra goodies. I say goodies, baddies. And it's just very, very nourishing. I mean, I took that bowl of browis or a kettle, whatever. I cooked the browis, and you can have maybe 2 ladles full of that, and yeah, one of the honey cakes, and you're full because satiation is there. But it also fills you right up, and that's simple food.
It's
And
whole food. It's whole food and it's
yes,
clean food.
yeah,
It,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much. That's lovely to hear.
Yeah. This has been such a delight. I feel like I want to go to Gotland just to
Wow.
come and see you in person, and also to go check out the botanical gardens. We have a
Uh,
botanical
and
garden here in Western North
if
Carolina.
you come, I will take you into Tinder's forest so
Oh,
you can
wow.
see where he walked.
Okay. I may take you up on that. Octavia, this has been such a delight. I hope we can maybe do it again sometime.
Thank
Thanks ever
you.
so much for
Thank
being
you
on.
so much. It's been
Yeah.
a real pleasure. Thank you.
Wasn't that grand? Oh, thank you so much, Octavia, for leading us on a glimpse into the spirit and soul of the Ceridwen Saga. Check out the show notes for more information about Octavia Randolph and all the wonderful opportunities she has to learn about and about her and her magical works. And don't forget the recipe book. Trust me, it's wonderful if you like to cook. As always, there are links in the show notes. If you're seeking insights and advice on how to create a better life for yourself, and if you'd like to dive in a little bit deeper into self-care and self-development, distant shamanic work, drop me a line at kevin@towardaBetterLife.com for your free discovery call. You can also visit my website of the same name, towardaBetterLife.com, for past episodes, blog entries, ways to enhance your spiritual journey, and a few products along the way to help you on your own journey. Please subscribe, I'll get it right, and follow Toward a Better Life through your favorite podcast platform. I'm still in Gotland, everybody. Please leave a review on Apple and Spotify podcast, and this helps to spread the word about the podcast and help to create, well, a better life for everybody. If you have any questions, or if you want to share your story, music or prose, and thanks everybody for those of you that have. It's an audio file, by the way. Please send it to me as an MP3. Or if you want to be my guest, just write to me, Kevin@towardaBetterLife. That's Kevin@towardaBetterLife.com. Until next week, enjoy your journey toward a better life.